What's up? It's Brian Sosha. We are here in the Mix Studios. Big guest today. Big show coming up in Philly. The Extreme Reunion. $30 tickets left. Only general admission. This thing's selling out. Everybody wants to go. All the old ECW fans. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but I probably am. Yeah. 7 p.m. this Saturday night, National Guard Armory in Philadelphia, and it's going to be the place to be. Every former ECW superstar is going to be there, including the man right here, one of the legends from ECW, the franchise, Shane Douglas. How you doing, man?
It's great to be here, man. Really, it'll come back to Philadelphia for me, putting feet on the ground here after all these years. I got off the plane last night and really got a buzz, just being back here in Philadelphia and the whole build-up to this thing. It's very humbling to see that the rest of our fans, the former ECW fans, have really locked onto this thing and realized that if there's going to be a future to wrestling, it's clear at this point, we'll get into all this, I'm sure, that Dixie Carter having after spent $150 million plus and nothing to show for it, and Vince's ratings dropping like a stone in water, his stocks to historic lows, couldn't even sell out WrestleMania after promoting it for a year and spending tens of millions of dollars. Clearly the product is broken at that level. It's time for us to bring the extreme fun back to wrestling.
I think you guys have a shot at it. I mean, everyone's going to be so excited, like I said, to see this again. I grew up in the Philadelphia area. Sure. I used to go to the Briarcliff Fieldhouse, the Lulu Temple we used to travel to when I was a kid.
Lulu, yes.
I used to try to hang out to take down rings for you guys, just to work for free, just to be a part of it. It was very cool. So it's cool that you're bringing that back. But you're sitting here and you're talking a little bit about Dixie Carter. You're talking about WWE and Vince. I mean, you've been everywhere in wrestling.
Yes.
So what I kind of want to do as we talk about Extreme Reunion is kind of take through your career and just comment on some things. Sure. The first thing that I was thinking, I mean, of course, for the people who don't know, he was trained by Dominic DeNucci.
Right.
And did a heck of a job training you, obviously.
Well, me and Mick Foley.
Yeah, Foley was there, too. I mean, you guys the same class,
names.
right?
Yeah, he was about a year behind me, but, we worked together quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, after you were done at DeNucci School, now your first stop, from what I can see, like your first, I guess, major stop, would have been WCW, NWA, late 80s?
No, before that was the first national UWF.
Yeah.
We had gone in that, and it was, I guess, sort of a quasi-national company. That's what happened. They tried to go too big, too fast. Bill Watts did and compete with Vince, and in the crux of that, ended up losing. You try to grow too fast and try to hit too many places too quickly, you lose a lot of money, and he ended up having to sell to Jim Crockett, who owned the NWA and then became WCW and.
Small steps, right?
Sure.
But your first, I guess, time, again, I'm not sure, I'm trying to recall this, but in WCW, NWA, would have been Dynamic Dudes with Johnny Ace, right?
Close. The first time in there, see, it goes through, I get confused. It was the NWA, and then my first run in the NWA, they put me with Magnum TA, where I learned the belly-to-belly suplex from. And it was right after he'd come back off the horrific accident that left him partially paralyzed. And really had such just a drive for the business and a love for the business. But what was awkward for me was it was only spoken about. We did everything behind the scenes. He didn't want to be on camera too much because of the paralysis that he had suffered in that car accident. But he did teach me the belly-to-belly suplex, which I've used for quite a long time in the wrestling business. But more than just the moves, I learned the psyche of the business, of how to look, when somebody comes and spends $20, $30, $40, $50 to watch you perform. It was drilled into us then, and I've carried it with me to this day, that those fans, whether one shows up or 10,000 show up, every fan that's there spent their hard-earned money to be there. And we owe it to them to make sure we give them the absolute best product we can give. So many times I've heard it working in WWF, and I don't mean to keep on slamming on them, but just try to put in perspective. When I was working in WWF or WCW, how many times I'd hear, hey, the building's only half full, let's take it easy tonight. And my thought was, if you take it easy tonight, it might only be a quarter full next time.
It's good
Let's go out there and knock it down so that the people that missed it say, hey, I'm not going to miss it again, you know?
Yeah, so as you progressed, and I don't mean to get back to this, but I need to know about this. I need to know, because this is, I said Johnny Ace, Dynamic Dudes.
Yes.
So you were with him for what, like a year maybe?
About a year and a half, right.
Okay. Now, where he is now today, does that shock you? Or do you think he had like the business sense and the savvy to get to where he is today?
No, look, Johnny's an extraordinarily bright kid, guy. I mean, we grew up as kids together, but he came from a corporate background. He had worked for, I believe, Honeywell up in Minnesota before he even got into wrestling. So it doesn't surprise me because, A, he's college educated, B, he's got that corporate background. he fits into that 3-piece suit routine, that I never quite, acclimated to.
Yeah.
But he does have a good head on his shoulders. The one thing that surprises me with Johnny, though, is for years, not only we were together as a team, but we, traveled together quite a bit before that while he was still working with the sheep herders and then as the Dynamic Dudes, and for some time afterwards. And he used to say nightly, because he didn't like the way at that time, as one of the boys, how the boys were being treated by the company, treated like a piece of meat, and it doesn't matter if you get hurt, if you're hurt, get out of my way, that kind of stuff. Treated very condescendingly, and he used to say to me every single night, Shane, with our college educations and our backgrounds, one of these days we're going to be running this industry, and when we get our turn, we're going to do things differently. And now I hear from the boys that are wrestling up there now, the wrestlers that are up there now, saying that it sounds to me like Johnny Ace is just the same type of old promoter. And I say that, look, becoming a boss is very different from being a wrestler. There's a lot of babysitting that has to go on. Last night we were on the phone till 3 o'clock in the morning taking care of guys, travel issues, and these just last-minute things that, as grown men and professionals, they should have either taken care of or had asked about before last night. But that's what happens in that position. So it goes with the territory. I saw an interview with Paul Stanley from KISS one time, and he said, if you want to be a politician, don't bitch when you have to wear a tie. And I thought, what a great line that is. And so I'm not complaining about it, but it goes with the territory. So to be fair to Johnny, that's a very tough position to be running a company of that size with those many prima donnas and egos and attitudes and whatnot, to be able to do that and not take flack for it. Sooner or later, somebody's going to.
Yeah, everybody wanting to be the best. It's gonna come down at some point. Well, I mean, you talk about the current product now with him doing the GM roll and all.
Right.
What do you think? I mean, I kind of know your thoughts on the current product and what you're trying to do with Extreme Reunion, but I just kind of lay out your current thoughts with what's going on today.
It seems it's funny, when you live long enough, you see how things are so cyclical, and go right back to where they were. Wrestling in 1992 that gave rise, the door open for a company like ECW, was that they had lost sight of the fact that it's wrestling. If I turn on Monday Night Football, I want to see guys on the line blocking and cutting each other. I want to see running backs coming out of the backfield and either catching a pass or making a great run play. I want to see, in other words, I want to watch a football game. I don't want to tune in and watch 20 minutes of talking about who Mike Tomlin's wife is sleeping with this other coach, or this guy stole this guy's dog. For God's sakes, I want to see football. And the marquee outside says wrestling. A few years back, Vince McMahon had to change his name from World Wrestling Federation because it was owned by the World Wildlife Foundation. And so when he changed the name, he changed it to WWE, World Wrestling Entertainment. Now, if he were sitting here, he will tell you he's not wrestling. So my thought would be, then why didn't you drop wrestling out of the name? If I've got guys wearing cleats, shoulder pads, and a helmet and throwing a pigskin around, I'm not a ballerina. I'm a football player. If I'm wearing boots and tights and I'm in a wrestling ring, I'm a wrestler, regardless of what you call it. So I don't know if they, this whole we're entertainment, we're this, we're that. You can see the ratings have dropped, as we were talking about before we came on this interview. The ratings have gone to stunningly low. If you'd have told me 10 years ago that WWF or WWE would be doing high 2s, low 3s, I'd have called you a liar. And yet that's where they are. Their stocks are down at historic lows. They couldn't even sell out WrestleMania this past year after promoting it for over a year and spending tens of millions of dollars to promote it. To me, when I was a kid in the business, you said WrestleMania, it sold out like that. So clearly there's something broken in the product. And like I said earlier, Dixie Carter's company has spent $150+ million and has nothing to show for it. And now they have great talent. Bobby Roode is a stud. Samoa Joe is a machine. They had Petey Williams and let him go for some reason. And yet in 2012, the fact that we're still talking about Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair, nothing against those guys. It's not 1984 anymore.
It's not, yeah.
So that's where the problem is. It's a younger man's sport, and it needs to focus on the wrestling. When's the last time you saw a move, a counter move, a takedown? I do a thing in my matches now where when I grab on a hold, like say an abdominal stretch, I'll yell to the crowd, remember these? They're called wrestling moves. And the crowd pops every night. It just shows you the difference of then to now.
The mentality,
what the business has to go back to, right.
Now, so that's what you're saying could help fix the business. But, I mean, you've been all throughout the business, like I said earlier, and you were in WCW. We talked about that.
Sure.
And then you were also in WWE for a quick run. I think you did really good in the Rumble.
Very brief.
And then, but it was something with your father, right?
Yes.
That speaks volumes that you left something you loved for something, obviously, you love more to help out.
Sure.
What was that like? I mean, when you talked to were they mad that you were leaving?
No. In fact, when I was there in 1990, that's part of the only reason I went back in 96. When I was there in 1990, I had a good run, made decent money, but it was a very uneventful run. I was just in the middle of the card. I wasn't considered into the top tier at that point. And when Dad came down with latter stage emphysema, and was clear that he was not going to be able to live on his own individually anymore, that he'd have to have somebody there. And I was the only one that was really capable of helping him out like that. So I went to Vince and told him, and he said, he looked me right in the eye in a private meeting, and he said, Shane, you've been a fantastic employee for us. The door is open to come back anytime you want. Family comes first. You go take care of your dad. And I always respected that. Yeah. I thought that was such a, that's what I would have expected any human being to say. Mm-hmm. Forget boss or head of a company, any human being to say. And so it surprised me. No, it didn't surprise me, but it made me feel good that he had said that. Yeah. And so whenever I left and went back in '96, it was obviously a tough thing to go home. I had to work, so I went and got my first teaching job and taught school. And in that interim point when I was teaching school and Dad was slowly, gradually going downhill, which for anybody out there that's been through it knows it's a horrible thing to watch a parent just slip away like that. Mm-hmm. And so that was tough on me emotionally. But I knew my dad, what I learned from both my parents was hard work, the work ethic. My dad worked on the railroad, was a World War II vet. My mother worked in a mill. So we were raised on the work ethic, blue-collar work ethic. And I'd always carry that with me in the wrestling business. And so when this company, ECW, Eastern Championship Wrestling at that time, came up here in Philadelphia, I'll never forget the first day we flew in for it. Eddie Gilbert was booking it at that time. And Terry Funk and I got picked up at the airport by the van. And he always called me Shano. He said, well, Shano, how long do you think we'll ride this train before it runs off the tracks? We really honestly believed it would be two or three shows maybe and done. And at no time did we ever think that this place would have a 7-year run and would revolutionize the industry. It shocked us probably as much, or if not more, than the fans.
But that's what I was going to get at. I mean, you came here to ECW, to Philly Eastern Championship Wrestling at the time.
Right.
And you didn't think it was going to revolutionize anything. So when you came in as were you the franchise right away? Didn't you become it after you attacked Dreamer? Or
no, when I first came in, Eddie Gilbert was booking. My ring name at that time was the Fabulous One, Shane Douglas.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Sort of a takeoff of the Memphis stuff. And he left very quickly. There was a falling out between him and Todd Gordon. He left. Paul Heyman, who was his assistant, stepped right in. And, really one of those things where you're right place, right time. He was the exact right person to be in that position at that time because he had come with this background of this little dweeb that sat in his house and watched nothing but wrestling from around the world. And he brought that to the States for the first time, that lucha style, the Japanese style.
It was like a whole new world. I was a kid at the time. I remember watching.
Different, right.
It was a whole different world. But as you got there, and the fans, started taking liking to you, started doing more villain-like stuff.
Right.
I mean, did you feel, sometimes as a wrestler, you can feel this coming on, this run that you're going to have. Did you feel good about it? Did you?
I felt good about the character. When Paul came to me and gave me the whole idea for the franchise at that time, remember, the NFL was just beginning to classify one of their players as the franchise player. And so that was the whole idea, was the franchise was the franchise player to the ECW. And when he gave me the idea for the character, it was very simple. He only ever gave me one direction. It wasn't like micromanaged in every week, do this, don't do that. He said to me the very first night we talked about it, he said, you're the captain of the football team that steals everybody's girlfriend and sleeps with them. And so I said, well, I know that guy. So, and then over the next 2 years, we fleshed that character out and made a ton of mistakes with the character. But I only made them once. When it didn't work, it got scratched off the list. So after a year and a half, 2 years, there was a character that was very organic, very close and true to who I was on the dark side, which I think everybody has the dark side. Mm-hmm. The franchise is that guy that has never learned that off switch. Whatever pops into his head, he says. Whatever he wants to do, he does. There's no. I guess some people would say that that's psychotic. The guy that can go out and murder somebody and explain why it was the right thing to do. And to me, that character had very compelling possibilities to television.
Yeah.
That the first guy to ever come out and use the F-bomb on television. It just oozed through that this character was in his mind the most important thing walking on the planet. And when that character stepped on television and had this beautiful valet with him, and suddenly you see him throwing guys down with broken necks and throwing the NWA title down, there was nothing he wouldn't do. That's compelling to watch. It's like a train wreck. You're waiting to see
what's he going to do next. And you touched on two things that I want to touch on. One, when you threw the title down, that story's been told. If you're a true fan, you know everything about that.
Sure.
But the question I've always had is afterwards. After you did it, well, first of all, how long in advance did you know you were going to do that?
That week, Paul Heyman called me up. Todd Gordon knew that there was something in the works with the belt. I don't think he knew, and I may be wrong on this, but I don't believe he knew the parameters that we may or may not do that. He just knew there was something going on. Look, we felt very strongly at the time the NWA was dead. It was a done and over issue. Eastern Championship Wrestling at that time had a very strong following, and we knew that. We knew we were on the move and we were growing. So the question for us as a company was, are we going to allow them to latch onto us and suck the lifeblood from us? Or are we going to use them to get the showcase, to get the little bit of spotlight on us, and then use that to catapult us to the next level? And for me that night, when I look up at the sky and I say, "Here we go, Dad," that was not I hadn't planned that out or whatever. It just came straight from the heart. My dad had just passed away previously, and it never saw his son get to become world heavyweight champion. He saw him become world tag team champion, television champion, but never the world champion. And my dad was the one that really got me into watching wrestling as a teenager. And so, to me, I thought, right now he's up there bragging to everybody up there that
awesome.
Hey, that's my son down there. He's the world champion, And so that's where it came from. But it was also the first time in my life as an adult that I began to realize what my dad was talking about. When you're a kid growing up, your dad's always telling me, "Here's my son sitting next to me." And, I was telling him.
I was going to introduce you. I'm sorry, buddy.
And I'm sure he probably says, "What's my dad talking about?" At some point down the road, something will happen and click in his life, and I'll go, "That's what my dad's been talking about." And that's what it was with me that night. It was my dad used to always say, "You can soar with the eagles or walk on the ground with everybody else." And I never, what's he talking about? Soar with the eagles? Is he crazy? And that night I got it. We can either be like everybody else and play it safe and just be another face in the crowd, or we can take that chance to reach out for the ring, to try to fly high. And if we do, hey, we might fall flat on our faces, but there's at least a chance that we could soar. And luckily, in hindsight, the aftermath of that was that we did take ECW to the next level.
You got to give it that shot. I mean, you really do when you have an opportunity like that. But How about afterwards? I mean, when you walked into the locker room, not even that, even like the day afterwards, I'm sure you were getting phone calls or people were. What was the deal? I mean, it must have been chaos.
Yeah, well, for me, I wasn't so worried, could care less about what Dick Flair or some of those guys thought. But Harley Race, Terry and Dory Funk, the Briscoe brothers, Nature Boy Buddy Rogers. You go down to some of the lineage of the people that held that belt and carried that title over 100 years of lineage to that belt and pedigree. Those were the people I was concerned with. I mean, those were people I looked up to and idolized and respected the world out of. And I didn't want them thinking that I was doing something overtly disrespectful to them or their legacy. It was simply at that moment in time the NWA was dead and gone. That NWA
wasn't their NWA.
That night wasn't their NWA. Yeah. And I never took in Steamboat. I never took any flack from them personally, but a few of them did ask, what was that all about? And as soon as I explained to them, they got it because they had all been in the business and understood. They had stood in the same position I had stood at one point in their career, and they got it.
Well, definitely. I mean, I'm glad they did, too, because, I mean,
thank God.
I remember actually watching you meet up with Lou Thesz at Break the Barrier in Philly, and I just remember thinking, wow, man, this will be interesting, and it seemed like you guys got along great.
For me, I mean, meeting those guys like that, the most humbling thing for me is, I was a snot-nosed kid that grew up in a project, and I never had any ambition or belief or pretension that I could be a world heavyweight champion or be some star in this industry. I just wanted to get into wrestling, A, to stay in shape initially, and then B, have a little bit of fun. I never had the idea that, hey, I'm getting into this business because I think I could be the world heavyweight champion. But to have, all these years later, look back and say I've been the world champion this many times, but even more important than all those accolades, meeting the Lou Theszes and the Harley Races and knowing them very well on a professional level. A couple of weeks ago, I was up in Toronto and I did a tag match with Dominic DeDucci and I.
He's still going?
Yeah, he's still going. Probably he'll kill me.
He's late 70s, huh?
Or pushing 80 or better.
Wow.
And I tell you, I still wouldn't take. He's still hard as a rock, solid. Obviously his body's beaten up a bit and stuff. But then we had Bruno Sammartino at ringside.
He's in great shape still.
He's in phenomenal. Just had back surgery, and every other day he goes out and jogs 5 miles, lifts weights every day. These guys are impressive, but when I came back from the ring, Bruno said to me, "Wow, Shane, you still have the passion for the business." And coming from somebody like the living legend Bruno Sammartino, I mean, I was floating 10 feet off the ground.
Oh, yeah,
my God, my idol, from being a kid in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Bruno was the man.
Yeah, yeah. Philly, too.
And to hear him say that to an idiot like me, I was like, wow, man, maybe I might have some future in this business.
It's refreshing to know, though, that like something like that still means a lot to you after all the stuff you've done.